does it mean when we lack self-belief, and how to determine and how to pick it up, basically, how to identify it within ourselves. So I think I can see myself live on Facebook too, so just give me a wave if you're live with me, say hello, and we'll get started in just a moment. Just a momento. So as always, I'm Rebecca Lockwood, your neuro-linguistic programming trainer, hypnotherapy trainer and breakthrough coach trainer. And we're going to be talking through what does it mean when we lack self-belief. So I'm live with you on Instagram at the same time as on Facebook. So if I'm not looking in your direction, that is why. Hang on a second, just had a bit of a... Okay, there we go. I can see I'm live. So hello. So yesterday I spoke through and we talked about what might be missing from your New Year's resolutions, and we talked about confidence and having utter belief that it is possible for things to happen. And I want to break that down a little bit more and talk about how we can determine what may be manifesting. So for example, a lack of self-belief. Now, in my previous business, I had a fashion business before this one. I started that business in 2013, and during that time I also had my first child, and I came to a point where I was telling myself that I didn't want to have that business anymore. Now, that business was very successful. I was on the biggest growth accelerator in the world. I was winning business awards, getting loads of PR. I had a team of fashion consultants. I was invited to go on Dragon's Den. There was lots of stuff going on, but I was telling myself that I didn't want that business anymore, and I closed it down. Now, I kind of fell back into my sales job at that time that I'd had previous to that. And through that, I started looking for some sales training, which was how I stumbled across neuro-linguistic programming, which is what I teach. Now, when I trained in neuro-linguistic programming, I had this massive realization that I hadn't closed my business because I didn't want it. I closed my business because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't have the self-belief in myself to be able to make it happen. My 5-year projection for that business was to turn over just short of $1 million. And when I think, at that point, when I trained in NLP, when I thought back, I realized it was because of the limitations I had been putting on myself and the stories that I was telling myself subconsciously about who I was and my place in the world. And so I actually was experiencing a lack of self-belief. But, and this is really important because we need to speak about this, if you had have asked me back then, before I closed the business down, if I had a lack of self-belief, no, definitely not. I was winning pitching awards, like I was standing up and delivering presentations. I was always really excited. I was always motivated to support others. And really, I really believed that I had the confidence and the self-belief to make it happen. But subconsciously, there was something else going on, right? There was a lot of lack of self-belief. And I want to talk to that today because it's really important to understand that we can't always identify in ourselves if we have a lack of self-belief. And often what we may do is we may kind of kid ourselves into believing that we do have self-belief when we actually, there's something underlying, some kind of limiting beliefs at the root, at the subconscious level, which are stopping you from taking action. So when we believe in ourselves, it's much easier to make things happen, right? When we have the belief in ourselves, things are easier. It's easier to take action. It's easier to keep ourselves moving towards what we want. We feel pulled towards what we want, and we feel more compelled to take an action. Things kind of fall into what we can call a flow state, right? But when we have a lack of self-belief, it makes things more challenging. It makes things harder to do. We can feel this block. We can feel this barrier, or it could manifest in different ways. And I want to talk about them different ways today. Now, we do have a quiz that we've developed, which also helps you to identify where in kind of these points that I'm going to talk about today, but also a bit more than that. It goes into it in a bit more depth. but where you can identify where you may be finding the challenges and the blockages that you're putting in place for yourself without really knowing about it, because that's what I was doing. But again, if you'd have asked me, or if you'd have even any of my friends at that time were like, I just didn't know, like it just, they don't believe it. I don't believe it sometimes. I'm like, how can that have happened? And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about teaching neuro-linguistic programming, because I didn't even know that I was holding myself back, but I was, right? Massive self-sabotage. Okay, so let's talk about how we can identify if we have a lack of self-belief in ourselves and if we're blocking ourselves. So the first one is negative self-talk. Now, negative self-talk, pretty self-explanatory. It's when we talk to ourselves in a negative way. However, sometimes you're just not consciously aware that you're doing it, but you'll feel bad. Like you'll feel like you just can't do something, or you'll feel like you'll maybe just feel a bit like me. That's not really a feeling, but you know what I mean. Or you'll just feel like there's some lack of like energy, and you may feel very depleted, but you may not consciously be aware of the conversations and the internal representation that you have in your mind, but it is still there, right? Some people can identify with the negative self-talk, like they can actually hear themselves having the conversations with themselves and how they're speaking to themselves, whereas other people don't necessarily identify the conversation. However, they're still having that internal conversation, that internal representation with the subconscious, and it's leaving them feeling really bad, right? Leaves you feeling unmotivated. It can cause procrastination. It just creates this block and stops you from being able to move forward. And as I'm going through these, if any of these are resonating with you, or you think, I think that might be me, do let me know, because it'd be really helpful for me to understand. And if you've got any questions, then please do ask, because it'll help me understand how to help you further as well. Okay, so the second thing is imposter syndrome. Now, you may have heard about imposter syndrome, or you may not. Imposter syndrome is where we may feel as though we're going to be found out for something, or we may feel as though we're not good enough to do something, and we're going to get found out, like somebody's going to find out that we're not good enough to do that. And it's not necessarily the truth. So it's important to remember that this isn't necessarily the truth. It's just your distorted perception of the truth at that moment in time. So it's just your perception, the way that you're thinking about it, and the kind of swing that you're giving to it. But what happens is you feel, and this can also manifest negative self-talk as well. It can just leave you feeling really uncomfortable, really uneasy, and really just not very good. And it creates this block and challenge where it just stops you from moving forward. The third thing that I want to talk about, and it's important to also mention that these three things are things that will manifest if you've got a lack of self-belief, but there are also so many more as well. If you're on Facebook with me, I've popped a link in the description to the quiz that we've developed, which will help you go a bit deeper in that. If you're on Instagram with me, you'll have to just pop me a message and I'll send you the quiz. But basically, these three things are things that we'll hear, like they're very common, but there's also a number of other ones as well. So the third thing I want to talk about is self-sabotage. Okay, so self-sabotage is when we self-sabotage our efforts at doing something. So let's say, for example, we've got a goal, we've got something that we're wanting to work towards, and we start taking action and we start getting results. And then all of a sudden we stop taking that action, but we don't really know why we've stopped taking the action, and then the results stop. Or it could even be that you don't even take any action in the first place because you have a lack of self-confidence, right? So self-sabotage can happen at the point before you even start taking action, but self-sabotage can also happen after you've started to take action, you've started to see some results, and then all of a sudden you stop taking that action for no apparent reason at all. So these three things then can manifest through having a lack of self-belief. So just to round up, number one was negative self-talk, number two was imposter syndrome, and number three is self-sabotage. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into these things and into more things that you may be finding is making creating a block for you or a challenge that's stopping you from moving forward, you can find the link. If you're on Facebook with me, it's in the description. If you're on Instagram with me, you'll have to just pop me a message for it. There's a link to our quiz where we'll help you identify where you may be facing blocks at the moment and how to overcome them. We've also got a free training coming up, which I'm super excited about, called Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. The last time we ran this training, we got absolutely incredible results for the people who joined us. So that is starting next Monday. Again, if you're on Facebook with me, the link is in the description. And if you're on Instagram with me, the link is in my Facebook, not my Facebook, in my profile. And last but not least, if you want to learn more about neuro-linguistic programming and breakthrough coaching, you can find the link, if you're on Facebook with me, it's in the description, to our NLP Foundations course, which is a basic fundamentals foundations course, which teaches you the basics of neuro-linguistic programming and coaching and really supports you with the certification. So if you're on Facebook with me, the link to that is in the description. And if you're on Instagram with me, you'll have to just pop me a message. And if you do have any questions about anything that I've spoken about today, or anything to do with neuro-linguistic programming and coaching, do feel free to pop me a message with any questions. Have an amazing day. I hope this was helpful. As always, I'm Rebecca Lockwood, your neuro-linguistic programming trainer, hypnotherapy trainer, breakthrough coach trainer, and I do also train a couple of other modalities, including timeline therapy, energy, EFT, and that's it from me. So have an amazing day, and I'll catch up with you all soon.